A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 211th episode of the Together for Education webinars brought to you by Notebook. As we proudly completed our 200th episode recently, going down the memory lane, it was back in 2020 when we here at Notebook decided to launch a platform for the educators to connect meaningfully on discussing problems they were facing on the rising need of digital education and online learning and arrive at common solutions. Little did we know that day about this platform growing so big, where principals and educators across the length and breadth of the country have participated over so many sessions. We thank you all once again for supporting us and would look forward to your gracious presence in all our upcoming episodes. We have discussed extremely vibrant topics here, like digital learning, NEP and assessment, extracurricular topics like sports and theatre, topics like school finance and management, and even evolved topics like child psychology. Our today's topic is the habit of reading newspapers. The combination of the hot morning cup of tea or coffee and the daily newspaper is a picture that all of us have been brought up with. Will our next generation still long for this picture, or will it be something that will fade away with time? Let's hear from the experts today. Our first speaker on this topic is Mr. Philip Burrett. Mr. Burrett retired as a deputy headmaster from the illustrious Doon School in Dehradun after 44 years of serving in education across various institutions. Mr. Burrett served the Doon School as housemaster, head of department, dean of activities, dean of student welfare, deputy headmaster, second master, and acting headmaster with great distinction. He also carried out a visioning exercise for the Doon School in the year 2011 through an in-depth study of a number of British public schools and various schools in the US. Mr. Burrett qualified as a leadership trainer at the Wellington College, UK in the year 2000. He is also a naturalist, an adventurer, and a naturalist. And we here at Notebook are truly privileged to have Mr. Burrett as a senior advisor. Sir, thank you so much for being here today. A very good evening, and over to you, please.
Very good evening to you, Gagori, Achin, and everyone at Notebook, and our esteemed panelists and our guests. I'm on my phone, so I may not be very clear. So 20 years ago, Gagori, it was a very big thing to read the newspapers, and there was a close correlation between who did academically well in school and who read the newspapers. So I come from a generation where there was only radio and newspapers that gave us to connect with the outside world. The very small radius of influence. And I think we were encouraged by our teachers to develop the habit of reading the newspapers. And there was a lot of excitement around the paper rack when the papers were put into the racks in the morning. And I think of all the habits that we picked up in school in those days, I think newspaper reading was one of the best. But I don't think you can just ask children to go and read the newspapers. I think we need to take them through a lesson on how to read the newspapers, where to find what news, how to compare the same news by two different journalists in two different newspapers. Where do you get the editorials? I think a little bit of a hand holding in the beginning is very important. Also, I think in the newspapers, there is so much in it. There's political news, there's international news, current affairs, sports, movies, gossip, the editorials, the economic news. Also, there's a lot of amusement with puzzles, sudokus, crosswords, and not to forget the matrimonials, because matrimonials were sometimes funnier than the comics. And I think this whole idea of getting up in the morning and picking up the newspaper gave us a glimpse of our larger world. The G2 summit, the Ukraine war, the latest movies, the scores in the Asian cricket, interesting editorial essays. I would love certain writers like Bakshi Kakaria and Jag Suraya, and I would look forward to their articles and all that. Also, in those days, I think we were encouraged to read the newspapers because to do the NDA or the IITs or the civil service exam, all required a certain amount of general knowledge and current affairs. And this is the way we got it. Today, of course, children are exposed to so many different types of media. There's the television, internet, the World Wide Web, so many handheld devices. As far as advantages go, as a teacher, I think it improves reading and writing skill. I think there's a lot of entertainment, and you can see the importance of, the importance a country gives let's say Australia, I think that the 10 pages are devoted to sports in most Australian papers. So you can see where they devote their importance to. I think it's the best source of general knowledge in schools. However, having said that, I think general knowledge is fading away because remembering the longest rivers and the highest waterfalls is not needed today because you can get them at a touch of a cell phone. Um, I think it keeps you up to date with politics, which is a very important thing in current affairs. It's also very good for doing research, and editorials are really still worth reading. And I think it also improves one's vocabulary. But the problem with papers today is there's so much yellow journalism. What do we believe? Today papers are run by political parties. And so what is fake news? What is gossip? What is propaganda? We were told that the Hindu was the best paper. And then the Statesman came in, and then the Tribune. So what do we read? What do we trust? Because every paper has a certain political lean to it. The other thing is the quality of journalism, I think, has dropped tremendously. And today's newspapers are very poorly edited. Some of the articles are very poorly composed. Our newspapers are full of sensational news, the tragic news, depressing news. Dog biting bus driver in Dhanbad, or school teacher, at a hill station was hospitalized. This news is not, somebody taking a bribe. This news is not important news. And yet our papers are full of sensational news because it's there because this is what most people want to read. Young people also get a lot of information from their apps, online sources. They're a visual generation, and therefore they are not into reading the newspapers. And then again, which newspapers to read? Is it the Tribune? Is it the Amrita Bazaar, Patrika? As I said earlier, everyone has a different lean to it. The Hindustan Times. At the Doon school, one of our headmasters had a brain wave, and he said that every boy must get a newspaper. So 500 newspapers were delivered to the houses. Of course, after some time, we discovered that we were collecting piles and piles of unread newspapers. So we whittled that down into every house gets a bunch of papers, which is easily available for the boys to read after lunch in their rooms. And that, I think, was turned out to be a very, very good habit, a little extravagant financially, but it really made the boys read at a time when they could read on their beds. Newspapers take a lot of space, so getting rid of these, it's a housewife's menace, getting rid of all these newspapers to the trash man. And I fear that, like the postman, the newspaper wala could become obsolete very soon. Die-hard traditionalists like me still love the newspaper. I just love the smell of paper. And each morning when the newspaper is thrown into the balcony, I just love it like I love the smell of an open new book with a coffee in my hand. I think Calcutta, where Gogori comes from, has a tradition of early morning walkers who end up at a tea shop, all reading the papers, hunched over their papers, and discussing the latest news. It's a very political town, I think. So I think there's so many interesting lessons that can be taught in history, English, geography. If teachers use the newspapers, well, the crossword, the Sudoku, it can be an addiction. My father was addicted to Sudoku and the crossword, and nobody got a look into the papers till he got the crossword done. And therefore, I think, on the whole, it's a very, very good habit. I think despite what modern technology has done for us, I think we still need to read the newspapers. And that's my view of it. I look forward to the views of our esteemed panelists. And of course, Achin, thank you very much, Gagori. Gagori?
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for those wonderful deliberations. Indeed, Calcutta newspaper is quite famous, and it's quite amazing to have the smell of the first newspaper in the morning, as you mentioned. It's same for me as well. Thank you so much for your wonderful deliberation, sir. We'll move on to our next speaker. Well, ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker on this topic is Mr. Achin Bhattacharyya, CEO and founder at Notebook. A chartered accountant by training, Achin was a director at Deloitte prior to starting Notebook. He has worked in India and abroad in various senior capacities in GE, PwC, KPMG, and Deloitte. Achin is a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales, a fellow of the ICAI, a member of CP Australia and CP Ireland, and a member of CIMA UK. He is also the recipient of the prestigious Indian Achievers Award. An avid reader and a passionate traveler, Achin has keen interest in economics, history, literature, and philosophy. He is a regular speaker at various forums and chambers of commerce and contributes articles to numerous publications regularly. He is also on the board of some of the most renowned corporates and contributes significantly to their brand strategies. Achin, a very good evening, and over to you, please.
Good evening, everyone. Gauri, I hope I'm audible.
Absolutely.
I once again welcome all of you to today's session. So today we have a wonderful topic at hand. In fact, I think we all agree that we cannot imagine our mornings without newspapers and a cup of hot tea or coffee. In fact, today, if I look back at my own journey, I think I firmly believe that the contribution of newspaper to a person's education and enlightenment is tremendous. And in a thriving democracy like ours, the role of newspapers as conscience keepers of the nation to ensure that people are aware about issues on the ground, be it national issues, be it international issues, be it issues with regard to politics, business, investment, new opportunities, and also people with varied interests, be it sports, be it movies, education, preparing for examination. I think there's something for everyone. And the role of newspaper, of course, media being the fourth pillar in democracy, I think in terms of shaping and molding public opinion is tremendous. That's a huge responsibility. And we would all agree that people do get influenced. There's no doubt about it. Even today, when there are so many different sources of information, be it scores of news channels, be it news feeds that we continuously keep on getting every minute in our smartphones. But there's no doubt that our opinions do get influenced, and very strongly they do get influenced by reading newspapers. And I think that's why they have a huge role to play. Because the whole concept of triggering debates and discourses, which is so essential in a thriving democracy, that only happens when news is neutral. I think Burrett have referred about fake journalism, yellow journalism. These are, of course, very dangerous things. And I think that's where readers also need to take responsibility in order to be open-minded. And when we pass on the baton to our next generation in terms of developing their reading habits, I think it's equally important to make them aware, to enlighten them that it's very important to read. But at the end of the day, it's equally important to decide to, before forming an opinion, indeed, read from various sources and apply one's own judgment. But putting that aside, there's no doubt that the role of newspapers, and that's how it has been through ages, through decades, has always been so important and very inspirational too. Imagine a small boy somewhere in one remote corner of the country opening the newspaper and coming to know about someone from a small town winning an Olympic medal, or maybe some recent discovery in sciences. How inspirational it is to him or her. So I think as far as role of newspapers are concerned, we would all agree that it's very important. And for those who think print is out of fashion in news, let me share a very small story. Very recently, I was reading an interview of Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google, who said that he starts his day at 6:37, and two items which are a must in his to-do list. One, of course, is a cup of tea, like many of us. And second, he is very particular about it, reading a newspaper. And yes, in physical format, print. Now, imagine the CEO of the world's largest company also coming up with this honest observation. Yes, he also did acknowledge that he reads news online. His favorite newspapers are Wall Street Journal and online New York Times. Now, very recently, I was reading a survey by Newsworks, which is like a marketing body for newspapers all over the world. And in that survey, there was a very interesting comparison between the reading habits of younger and slightly older people. So the study called the Generation News looked at how people who are aged between 18 to 34, the millennials, consume news as distinct from people who are aged around 50 to 65, the boomers. I found that millennials access news brands continually throughout the day. Unlike the senior lot who are more accustomed to reading news early in the morning, the millennials are naturally hooked onto their smartphone and with continuous feeds coming in. Now, despite facing a far more cluttered news landscape than previous generations did at their age, young people still form strong news brand habits. Around 75% of millennials turn to professional news brands to get balanced point of view. So they also acknowledge that when they read something in social media, something interesting, something sensational, in order to cross-check, in order to know a little more about it, they refer to authentic professional sources. Of course, the other part of the survey, the next observation is, all of us can take a guess, that they are far more likely than boomers to exhibit their news habits on digital devices, allowing them to regularly snack on news. Now, what is so important is that even today, one thing is very clear, that in spite of the fact that social media being so prominent and anything happening anywhere within a split second coming to our notice, still youngsters do take the time and effort to continuously cross-check, and more than 78% of respondents have acknowledged to that. More than 1 million boomers read a digital news brand daily and enjoy the speed and ease with which they can access news. So the seniors also have caught up with digital news while also indulging in newspapers. And unlike their children, the boomers' habits are more centered on specific times of the day, most of them early in the morning. For both generations, the saturation of news in a multi-platform world has strengthened the role of news brands. So that's the role of real and professional journalism has not been discounted even a bit. People are looking for authentic sources to cross-verify news to know more. Now, this goes on to show how important it is for people. The research also identified, and this is really interesting, 5 news habits. And these 5 news habits transcend both millennials and boomers across generations. First habit, fix. So what is fix? Access news constantly, prompted by general need and state of distraction. So in between work, continuously, like referred to as news snacking, continuously trying to know what's happening around. So constantly, by general need of distraction. Second, track. Access news regularly throughout the day to keep up with breaking stories. For instance, there's a cricket match going on. we keep on checking the score. Third, fill. When someone is moving from one place to another while traveling in a train, bus, cab, accessing news to pass time. Fourth, indulge. Making time to enjoy the news, getting pleasure out of it as a break from everything else in the day. And fifth, invest. Read the news regularly to get an in-depth perspective on stories. Now, while the habits are universal, millennials are more likely to adopt the fix and fill habits, while boomers have more time to adapt in habits like indulge and track and invest. So we live in a world saturated with news, with so much of information around us. So I think that's where it's so important that we do form informed judgments by referring to authentic sources and, of course, applying our own discretion. And I think that's the art, apart from developing reading habits, which is, of course, so nice, so important. But I think that's the art that we need to pass on to our next generation. The other part, I think, without mentioning whom, without mentioning senior citizens, this topic will always be incomplete. I think the role of newspapers in the lives of senior citizens, especially those who are completely at home, octogenarians, nonagenarians, I think the kind of loneliness they suffer, newspapers play a huge role. And I have myself seen how much time and effort they take to go through each and every section of the newspaper and wait patiently every day in the morning for the newspaper to come. That sound of doorbell and a cup of tea and newspaper. And it's so important to them. So I think it's a wonderful topic. It's a topic which is an evergreen topic. And to know more about this, and especially from the context of how do we ensure that we inculcate this wonderful habit in our next generation, we have a great panel here with us today. And I look forward to hear from them, their views on this important topic. Over to you, Gagori. I thank all of you for giving me a very patient hearing. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Achin, for those wonderful deliberations. Well, ladies and gentlemen, to discuss this topic today, we do have a wonderful panel lined up for you. But before we start with the panel discussion, a little bit about us here at Notebook. We are Notebook, an edtech platform that creates short videos pertaining to the school curriculum. This means that every topic from every subject of the school syllabus has been converted into a series of short videos that can be used in two different cases. One is when you as a teacher are starting out a topic in your classroom, you can play one of these videos as a method of visually introducing the topic to your students. These videos are just 6 to 10 minutes in duration and take up very little of your class time while offering the right kind of material to students to generate curiosity and excitement. The second is when the student is studying at home. Months later, they have access to the same videos on their personal devices, be it a laptop or a smartphone. They can watch the videos over and over again until they get a very clear understanding of the topic that you had taught. What I am going to do now is play you a mashup of notebook videos so that you know what they exactly look like.
Did you know that some people keep bees and collect honey, which is sold in the market? Let us see how Anita got into beekeeping. There were a lot of lychee trees in Anita's village, and these trees attracted a lot of honeybees.
Once upon a time, there used to be a big galaxy of stars called the Milky Way. A family of 8 planets and a star used to live there. Sun was the name of the star, and he was the head of the family. He was an important person as he emitted light for all other planets to survive. The planets ran here and there to capture sunlight.
Good morning, Amos. Have you done ledger postings?
Oh yes, Barababu, I have done ledger posting in my exams.
And how did you know that they were correct?
I used to ensure that the sum of all debits would equal to the sum of all credits.
And why so?
Because the basic principle of accounting says that for every debit, there should be an equal credit.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was a small part of some of our videos you just now saw. We have today connected with over 3,500 schools and have had millions of students and teachers benefit from our videos. If you head over to our website, www.notebook.school, you would find all such videos at your disposal. If you want Notebook in your schools, please do get in touch with our sales team at sales@notebook.school. With that, it is now time to introduce the wonderful panelists that we have with us today. We have with us today Dr. Rajan Joseph Kesar, Principal, Matha Senior Secondary School, Alappuzha, Kerala. Sir has an illustrious academic career with over 25 years of experience as a principal. He is a resource person in CBSE Trivandrum, city coordinator, NTA Alappuzha, former Sahodaya president, and also a CBSE social science resource person. Sir, a very good evening and welcome to the panel. Next, we have with us Premkumar, sir, Principal, Indian Education School, Kuwait. Sir has a career spanning over 35 years in the teaching profession, started at Indian School Muscat, a premier institution in the Middle East in 1983, and served the institution in various capacities. A career spanning 28 years at Muscat, starting from being a TGT Science, PGT Chemistry, HOD Chemistry, and Vice Principal of Senior School, and later as the Principal of the Grant School. Joined Indian Education School, Kuwait, under the aegis of Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan, Middle East in 2010, and continues to serve the school, which is one of the finest in the country. Sir has numerous awards in recognition to his name and has been appointed by the CBSE as Counsellor for Kuwait CBSE schools and also appointed as mentor to CBSE schools in UAE, Kuwait, and Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He is also the academic coordinator of the Science India Forum Muscat, an organization under the Vigyan Bharati of India, and actively contributes to its activities. Sir also served as the chairman of the Gulf Council of the CBSE affiliated schools in the Middle East in 2019-20. Sir, a very, very good evening and welcome back to the panel once again. Next, we have with us today Mrs. Hemlata Suri, ma'am, Counsellor, New Delhi. Ma'am is a passionate psychologist and a registered rehab professional with rich experience in both the corporate and school education sector. She's an alumnus of University of Delhi and Jamia Millia Islamia. She's empaneled as CBSE counselor and a rehab psychologist for the last 10 years. She's also working with the Manu Darpan and CBSE Helpline. She's one of the founding members and resource persons of some eminent teachers forums and Entalify, which is a non-profit organization run by IIT Delhi students that creates online and offline learning resources for children from diverse backgrounds. Her endeavor is to create much needed awareness about mental health and break the stigma attached to mental illnesses. Ma'am, a very, very good evening and welcome back to the panel. I welcome all my panelists to the forum. Would like to start with Dr. Rajan, sir. Sir, very good evening. My question to you would be, what is the importance of reading newspapers for school children? And in the digital media space, what are the ways a school can promote to hold back this good old habits for those school kids?
Okay, good evening to all. I think it is we will start with one wonderful quote of Henry Ward Beecher. The newspaper is a great treasure to the people than uncounted millions of gods. So I think reading of newspaper is a beneficial children, though it should be improved reading skills. And next one, it will be enhancing the vocabulary of the students. Then the other one we can say increasing the current events knowledge. And next one we can think about developing the critical thinking and creating awareness of social issues and better knowledge about local geographical features and historical events. And all the more giving new idea about cultural awareness giving new idea about cultural awareness. And all the more once the habit of reading the newspaper, it's helpful for the students to read, helping the or encouraging the students to read non-fictions. And when the students is having the reading habits, newspaper reading habits, automatically improving the writing skills. And one more thing we can say about newspaper reading, it's helpful for the students to educational supplements. So once they habit of reading, it will be supplement reading for the other books and all. Developing the spirit of civic engagement. And what I'm feeling, it's highly helpful for the parent-child interactions. Evening dining table, they are all assembled. They can discuss about different topics in the newspaper. In the morning hours, parents won't be getting that much time to discuss, but evening, they're getting sufficient time. And go for the discussions in the different points, improve the reading skills. So regularly reading the newspapers help the children to enhance their reading abilities. Newspaper articles often contain advanced vocabulary and sentence structures that can be challenged and expand the child's reading comprehension skills. So enhancing the vocabulary, we can think about exposure to a wide range of words and phrases in the newspapers can lead to an increase in child's vocabulary. So always we have to be very sticking for the improving the vocabulary. I'm thinking about my school. So word a day, the program is there. After completing 7 years or 10 years, automatically the child is acquiring the vocabulary standard. They're quite, always I recommend the students to start with reading the Indian Express, then go for the Hindu. Then they will be quite capable of. So we are thinking about increasing the vocabulary. Learning new words in a context can be particularly effective in building language skills. And current events. And newspapers provide school children with update information of local, national, and international current events. This knowledge can help them to stay informed about the world around them and engage them in informed discussions. And nowadays, all the competitive examinations, they're so particular in the general knowledge area. And they have, especially CBSE, now in 10th standard, 50% marks objective type questions are there. And same time, in the +2 level, 40%. So once the students is having the knowledge, reading the different articles in the newspaper and all, highly helpful for them to score good marks. And awareness of social issues, what is going on. The newspapers often cover social issues such as poverty, climate change, healthcare. Now in the Kerala, Nippo, now the people are very scared of that. Heavy rain is going on. They're all immediately they will get information. And which can be help the children to become more socially aware and empathetic. It can inspire them to take interest in making positive impact on their community and the world. And better knowledge about local geography and history. Newspaper articles frequently reference to geographical locations and historical events. Reading newspapers can improve the child's geographical and historical knowledge as they encounter a reference to the different countries, regions, and past events. And another important benefit the students are getting, giving new cultural awareness. The newspapers often feature articles on culture, arts, traditions from various parts of the world. This exposure can foster cultural awareness and greater appreciation for diversity. So I'm not prolonging that. Different people are waiting. And 1 or 2 points I'll say. If it is in the new generations, they are very fond of reading in the digital ways. So we must encourage the students to read in digital way, provide online newspaper subscriptions to the students. The school can subscribe the digital editions of newspapers and provide students with access This can be make it more convenient for students to read newspapers on their devices. Recently, I think yesterday I discussed with the same panel program is going on. One of my students is working as a collector in Punjab. And I mentioned about, sir, you must mention that the best benefit I got to come to this civil service cadre is the reading of newspaper. Regularly, he used to read the newspaper. He was my student at about 12 years here in the school. Integrating newspapers into curriculum. Incorporate the newspaper reading as a part of the curriculum. Assign articles related with the current events, specific subjects, and discuss them in the class. And here using the Google Classrooms. So in the COVID time, we experienced. So in the COVID time, the Google Classroom frequently we used. I used to share the daily newses with the students. Even we have in our school, a special group is there for the news group. They used to share all the important news what are coming in the medias. They used to share the students from 4th standard to 12th standard. And we used to arrange a reading week for the students. Reading week in the sense, the students used to cover different languages. They used to convey to the people. And we have our own website is there. And daily we used to share important news in our school website. And based on that in the digital media, we can, new generations, we used to arrange the discussions and debate, encourage the class discussions, debates of current issues, where students can express their opinions and learn from each other. By combining the traditional newspaper reading with the digital resources and focus on media literacy, schools can continue to promote this valuable habit in the digital age. Anyway, thank you. We will have the discussions afterwards. Thank you, madam. We'll discuss further points afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, for your wonderful deliberations. Okay, so we will move on to Hema ma'am, Hemlata Suri ma'am. Ma'am, my question to you would be, with the advent of digital media, the habit of reading newspapers is on the decline. What do we do to keep our youngsters into this habit? And what are your suggestions, ma'am?
Good evening and namaskar everyone at Notebook and all the audiences who have joined in. And it's really again a wonderful feeling to be back and having me back, Gaguri and Notebook. So it's a very pertinent topic which you have taken up, and because we all are worried as parents, as teachers and heads of school that our children are not reading. They're giving up the habit, which is a very golden thing to do, to keep reading. It's like an exercise to the mind, as we say, the exercise for the body. So reading is an exercise for body. It's very important. So whenever when we read, I mean, my panelists have already discussed the benefits and reasons of reading. So reading is very important. As a psychologist and working in mental health, I'll always feel that reading develops empathy. Reading makes you experience and makes you and connect with one of the few wonderful people who have been there in past centuries. You can strike conversations with them through reading. So for me, it's very important for a psychological journey for a child and its mental health. So as a parent and working in rehab field, it's one of the very important thing to do, to have reading, because we follow certain hierarchical pattern when we read. Like, we start with listening. The child comes to this world, we train them on listening skills. So LSRW is one pattern which we follow: listening, speaking, and then reading, and writing comes the last. So that is very important. So first things, and child need to master each step and each skill. And then, would you like to say something?
Ma'am, if you can just pause for a minute, I would like to test
Sure.
Premkumar sir's video.
Sure.
audio.
Yes, sir. Well, yes, definitely.
Sir, can you just speak a line? I was just worried.
Hello,
Yeah.
you can hear now?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sir. So we'll continue with Hemlata ma'am and then come back to you.
Yeah.
If it's okay? Absolutely,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right, all right. So we will follow that LSRW pattern, which is listening, speaking, which are the basic skills for children. And then reading comes the third, which is very important. And as we know, grade 3 for each child in our country is supposed to be the reading literacy grade. And these children who are reading literate, they contribute to the literacy rate of the country. So very important for schools, teachers to know and understand that reading per se, not just reading newspaper, but reading per se as a skill is very important, because that makes them confident, that makes them free from many things. If you see one of the quotes I just came across, that reading is something, once you learn to read, you will be free forever. So that makes you independent, that makes your thought process go on, and it just make you think out of the box. You start thinking, so it's very important for us as stakeholders to make them understand digital platforms are there. There's a lot of exposure, there's a lot of consumption of digital platforms, and it is very convenient. They are hands-on, because you can lie in your bed and you can be in any space and you can access those platforms and go through the news and everything. But reading newspaper is something which is very important. So as a parent and as a teacher, I always encourage my parents who come for these things, that you children lead by examples. So you need to read newspapers. Keep your phone aside, even for 10 minutes a day. If you sit and read newspapers, or any book for that matter, leave the books around, make it accessible to them. Buy various kinds of books on various subjects and diverse areas. So you have to encourage that also. You cannot tell your child, no, you have to study only textbooks. So keep those books which are related, maybe, and use certain words which child has never heard, new words. So introducing new words would always encourage them. And talking about the book you're reading, let's say I'm reading some XYZ story, and I would just tell him, wait, I'm at a very interesting point. Then your child might be, asking, what is this you're reading? So if you just narrate this whole thing and just make them guess, what will be the end of this story. So that will also help them to think, so that will kind of foster their creative thinking, out of the box thinking. They will give you certain reasons, certain ending to the story. So that way you can also foster, if the story, if you feel is they're ending it on a very negative note, you can always tell them, no, this could be the story, this could end there, but the author has ended on this note. So you can always shape up their thinking. But the reading newspaper as such is very pertinent, because it will help you to know about the environment which is around you. They will know what is going on across the world. That will also help them to strengthen their general knowledge, which is very, very important thing. Later in their life, they don't have to brush up and go through the coachings to go for these competitive exams, which I always found children struggling, 12th, especially the CUET. These students were always coming and calling up, ma'am, how to do these general knowledge part of this, because we've only been studying academics, math, science, physics, chemistry, or XYZ subject, but we never had this. So schools need to take care and look into this GK concept, and then they can further strengthen and develop this thing, So very important here for parents also to drop those digital platforms and stop talking about these things, and then can read newspapers, show them certain columns which are very beneficial. Don't give them very long and complex materials. We can always do the task analysis and break them into small stories. Like Times of India features this speaking tree. We can always introduce those small columns. Like my parents always gave me certain, like Khushwant Singh used to write one column. So I clearly remember that column, and I used to look forward reading that. And maybe sometimes, reading the forecast zodiac signs was another reason to pick up the newspaper and then further delve into it. So then at end of the day, we'll sit on the dining table and my dad will always ask, what is that was there, that news was there today? So we would always rush to, tell him what is there, because we used to get some chocolate or maybe some 10 rupee note. So that reward was there. So that's how that fostered, and I can never, end my day without reading a newspaper. I'll collect them and read them. So it's very important, that always helps me tuned to the current situations and the pulse, basically. So thank you so much, Gagri. I end it here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for your deliberations. Coming back to Premkumar sir, sir, a very good evening. Thank you so much for being here in the panel today. My question to you would be, how much is the importance of reading newspapers in the current digitized world for the school children? And how do we inculcate this habit? What do you do in schools particularly?
Thank you very much, and my apologies for that technical snag. This technology has posed, in fact.
Absolutely fine, sir. That's not a problem.
I'm so
Connectivity
sorry
issues.
about that. Thank you very much for inviting me, and it's my pleasure to be with Hema and Achin. I've been with all of them in the previous webinars too. Now, this topic on reading, really, I was, though I was very much tied up with my work today, and I wanted to be a part of your webinar because I found in the last decade or so, I should say, that every class I taught, a class of, say, and of course, in Kuwait, my classes are just 25 students, but in Muscat, I used to teach about 40, 45 kids. And I found over the years of my teaching career, the number of students who wear spectacles have grown in numbers, in fact. I keep a statistics of the number of students who wear glasses in my class whenever I visit a class to teach. I first look at the children, how many are wearing glasses. And I look back at my career path. When I started teaching for the first time, I hardly found about 3 to 4 students out of 40 wearing glasses. Now, in a class of 25 that I teach for the last 5 years, minimum 20 wear glasses. You may think this is an exaggerated number, but this is the fact. Now, why this transformation has happened? Because they are on the digital platform from the time they get up in the morning until they go to bed in the night. Except the time they are at school with us, that is 6 to 7 hours, all of the time they are reading WhatsApp messages, Instagram postings, or watch a movie. And this habit has started not now when they were in kindergarten. Today at home, when children are crying, what do the mothers do? Just take the mobile phone and give it and put on a cartoon or one rhyme, and they sit with that. But that was not the case when I was growing up. We had a library at home with Mills and Boons, Charles Dickens, Secret Seven. So many classics we had read in our times. Now, reading has almost died down, at least in the school where I am teaching. So much so, if you ask about name some books of Charles Dickens, they will not. If you speak about William Shakespeare and his work, many will not know. Now, this is because in the digital world today, I heard the previous speaker speak that we get a lot of information from the news that is being telecast, and on the social media, etc. But the pleasure of reading is not tasted by the youth of today, the Zoomers. They don't know what kind of happiness one can derive out of reading because they hardly read. The only thing that they read are their textbooks. And luckily in CBSE, we have at least up to class 8, a supplementary reader, which is invariably a novel that we prescribe, which they read with great difficulties, of course. So in the digital world today, I must say with authority that the concept of reading has declined. In fact, today, this morning, at the morning assembly, the English teacher requested me, please, sir, if you speak, the students will take part in the reading challenge program of CBSE. Unless you motivate them and encourage them, nobody is now registering because we announced this about 10 days back. Hardly students have registered for reading challenge, a program by CBSE. The reason is they can't read, they don't want to read. I did hear Dr. Rajan speaking about morning assembly, students come out and read. We also have similar program to motivate students to read. Honestly, I'm telling you, many stutter while reading. They can't read. Some of the names of the, presidents who came for the G20 meeting and was with Narendra, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, they can't utter their names properly because they never read these things in the news. They must have heard Arnav Goswami's or Times News or Mirror News, but they have not read this on a paper. They heard the sound. Hearing is different. Reading is different. The pronunciation, the diction, the sound, they cannot. So we have in school something called a week meant for reading. And we have a program called DEAR, DEAR, drop everything and read. So on that particular week, including the teacher, has to read in the class. We also have introduced another program that reading is not confined to languages. Reading must happen in social science. Reading must happen in science. Reading must happen in EVS. All subjects except mathematics, they have to read compulsorily across all the sections of the school, the kindergarten, the primary, the middle school, and the senior school. There's a reading program which is a must because we found that students' reading abilities are declining in a digitized world. And we have also planned for month-long reading. After a week-long reading, we train them to read at least for a month. May not be the full day, at least a period every month we will make them read. So reading, we have laid a lot of emphasis because we find our students can't read, but they can hear many things and they can store few things. But the art of reading, the speed with which they read, the vocabulary, as someone mentioned before me about, I'm not dwelling into that because all the plus points of reading has been discussed already. But I'm only trying to put across what the declining reading has done to the children. All are bispectacle. Their eyesight is getting deteriorated. At the age of 17, if they are like this, when they become of my age, what would be the condition of their eyes? So these are some of the concerns that I, as a principal of a school and a teacher also, thought I should share that how important is reading over listening to the social media, the different channels that we have. There's an IPTV where you have about 10,000 channels. You get news from all parts of the world. But for that, you need to sit in front of a glaring screen. When I was a child growing up, the Hindu newspaper used to have 40 pages. But now, whenever I go to India for my vacation, I found the Hindu newspaper having hardly 20 pages. There used to be separate sections: sports, cinema, classified. Everything used to be there in that Hindu newspaper to read. It will take, to read one newspaper at that time, it will take about 2-3 days, in fact, to read all the articles. But today, the Hindu newspaper or the Times of India or the Indian Express, they have become very few pages, thin sheets. And if you ask somebody, they say, who reads paper? Only the senior citizens are reading paper because they have no work. So they are retired at home and they are reading the newspaper. But people who work, they don't have time to read newspaper. This is the answer people are giving. They don't have time to read the newspaper. What a pathetic state we have reached because of the digitalization. We may say technology is a big boon to us, but it's a bane as well when it comes to the children who are growing and who are losing the pleasure of reading. So I, as an educator, strongly feel that we must inculcate at home the habit of reading. If at home how many homes today are subscribing for newspapers? They say, why should we pay for this? The news is available, it's happening around the world, and we get the news then and there. What is there to read in the newspaper? But people forget that the news that is covered on the television is not as exhaustive as the news written in the newspaper. This wisdom, unless it prevails in the minds of the parents at home, the children will not be able to continue and sustain the reading habits as they grow. Now they're having two mobile phones. Earlier we used to buy 2 newspapers. Now we don't buy a single newspaper, but we have more than 1 mobiles. So as a school principal, what we have done is we have made a class library compulsory. Every parent should donate 1 book at the beginning of the academic year. So there are 25 students. They bring 25 different books and all of them will read in that class. Once they finish reading, that teacher will pass on all the books to the next class and take her books to this class. So what has happened now, students have started reading more number of novels and books. They have started liking towards it, but I wouldn't say that they have reached the proficiency or perfection that I as a student had when I was in school. We always had in our bag 1 novel, which we used to read in the bus. We used to read in the bus the novel. But today they have no mobiles, they have earpods, they have other gadgets inside, not the book. So we send a circular to parents in the beginning of the year. Everyone must donate 1 book to a class library. At the end of the academic year, they can take it back. And for birthdays, we recommend parents to donate or not donate, gift a book to the child rather than some gift in the form of some toys or things. We say, buy a beautiful book and we give. And all of us prize winners in the school competitions, the award is a book that we give. So I think these are the ways that we ensure that the reading habit is not going to die, at least in our school. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share.
Thank you so much, sir. Wonderful inputs. The concept of do drop everything and read. It's really amazing. It has always been a pleasure to host you. Thank you so much, sir. I'll have to close this panel today. Thank you so much, Dr. Rajan, sir, T. Premkumar, sir, and Hemlata Suri, ma'am. Calling back Achin for the vote of thanks, please.
Yeah, I think wonderful session. Yeah, no doubt about it. Very seamless, very informative. But sir, thank you as always for giving us a great start for setting the tone for the evening. And I think, yes, we all agree with you. The smell of newspapers is something that we cannot live without. It's very important. Dr. Joseph, thank you so much, sir. I think some very important points you mentioned, especially given the fact that, yes, newspapers can form the basis for evening discussions. And I think parents have a huge role to play in that. And of course, the importance of vocabulary and current events. So I think these are all very important points. We all agree with you. And thank you so much for enlightening us. Premkumar sir, I think importance of reading habits, we couldn't agree more what you emphasized on. It's very important, no doubt about it. And it's unfortunate, but in many cases, yes, we do see that today's children, and I think parents also here have a huge role to play in this. Because at the end of the day, as parents, we need to lead by example. Mere lip service won't help. And I think you're completely correct on that. And also what you mentioned, the role of newspapers in terms of exhaustive news coverage. Otherwise, what happens is, very often because of time shortage, etc. Yes, electronic mediums also cover the news, but it might be selective reporting. So the freedom of deciding what's good and bad. And I think that exhaustive news coverage, that's why newspapers have a huge role to play. No doubt about it. Hemlata Suri ma'am, thank you so much for being here. And I think ma'am, it has always been a pleasure to host you, to listen to you. And some very important points you mentioned, including, of course, starting with LSRW, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And you also emphasized on the importance of reading habits. And we all do indeed agree, ma'am, that it's very important. So what a great session, and I'm sure members of the audience also found value in it and really enjoyed our session and took notes. We look forward to your continued patronage in the sessions to come. Thank you, take care, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye. Thank you.